Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to, skip the noise and really pull out the core insights from fascinating sources for you. Think of it as getting straight to the point on complex topics, maybe with a few aha moments, but without all the information overload. Today, we're diving into something really fundamental, biodiversity loss, and why it might be this hidden driver of system collapse. We're talking everything from microbes right up to societies.
Exactly. We've got this really compelling report that digs into that critical link between the variety of life and how stable things are around us. So our mission here is to connect those dots. How does losing species, losing that variety, make systems, all kinds of systems, more vulnerable to just breaking down? We want to find those underlying patterns.
Right. And if you listen regularly, you'll know we talk a lot about terrain, these underlying landscapes, right? Well, today that terrain stretches from like the microscopic world in soil and even our own guts, all the way to huge ecological systems and, yeah, even the complex terrain of our social structures.
Uh-huh. And to help us navigate this, we're leaning on some really key thinkers. We've got Dr. C.S. Halling, the panarchy guy, adaptive cycles.
Growth, collapse, renewal, yeah.
That's the one. Then Dr. Martin Scheffer, who's done so much work on ecological tipping points and, crucially, those early warning signs.
Can we see it coming?
Well, maybe. We'll get into that. And Dr. Diana Wall, her work on soil biodiversity is just fundamental, showing how vital that life under our feet really is.
Often overlooked, that stuff.
Totally. And finally, Dr. David Montgomery, who connects soil erosion directly to, well, the fate of civilizations. What's really striking, I think, is how all these different angles, ecology, soil science, history, they all kind of converge. They point towards this universal vulnerability when diversity disappears.
Okay, so let's jump in. This idea of diversity as a safety net, functional redundancy, what's that about?
Right. Think of it like nature having backups. Functional redundancy just means you often have several different species doing similar jobs in an ecosystem. Things like breaking down dead leaves or cycling nutrients in the soil.
Okay, so multiple players for the same role.
Exactly. So if you lose one species, maybe due to disease or some environmental change, others can step up and keep that function going. The system doesn't just grind to a halt.
It's like having multiple ways to charge your phone if one cable breaks. You're not totally stuck.
Perfect analogy, yeah. And that's why the report emphasizes its key for resilience, the ability of a system to, absorb a disturbance and bounce back.
Okay. And the report mentions effect traits versus response traits. How does that fit in?
Yeah, that's a useful distinction. An effect trait is sort of what a species does to its environment like. Maybe a tree provides deep shade, that's its effect. A response trait is how it reacts to the environment. Maybe one plant handles drought really well, another handles flooding. So a system with high biodiversity usually has a wide mix of both. Lots of different effects happening and lots of different ways species can respond to change.
So if a heat wave hits.
Exactly. If a heat wave hits, hopefully some species have the right response traits to survive, and they can keep the essential effect traits, the functions like nutrient cycling, going for the whole system.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the flip side, what happens when we lose that redundancy? Fewer species doing those key jobs.
Well, the system gets brittle. It becomes much more vulnerable, like laying off too many people in customer support. Suddenly, small problems become huge crises.
Right.
The report gives examples, in soil microbes. If you lose the variety of microbes that can break down a certain pollutant, the soil just can't clean itself as effectively.
Or in a forest.
Yeah, or imagine a forest that's lost a lot of tree species. One specific disease could come through and wipe out a massive chunk of the canopy, and that has knock-on effects for everything else living there.
And this idea of stress-induced essentiality, that sounds intriguing.
It is. It's basically saying that some species might seem, well, almost unimportant when conditions are good. They look redundant.
Like a bench warmer.
Kind of, yeah. But then, when a specific stress hits like a really bad drought, suddenly that deep-rooted plant, the one that didn't seem special before, becomes absolutely critical for holding everything together.
Wow. So you don't even know which ones are truly essential until things get tough.
Exactly. It really underlines why having that broad diversity,
Right.
even the seemingly redundant parts, is like critical insurance. You just don't know what future conditions will demand.
Okay.
And here's a really key point the report makes. Losing this redundancy isn't usually a slow, gradual decline in stability. It can push a system towards a tipping point.
Right. A sudden shift.
Yeah. As you lose those backups, the few species left doing a vital job become single points of failure, weak links. And a disturbance that a diverse system could just shrug off might now trigger a cascade, a much bigger collapse. This weak link amplification, they call it.
So small losses in diversity can have unexpectedly huge consequences down the line.
Precisely. It really changes how you think about just losing a few species.
Okay, that's a powerful concept. Diversity isn't just variety, it's functional resilience. Let's shift now to Dr. Hulling's work. Panarchy, adaptive cycles.
This is about the rhythm of change, right? Growth, stability, collapse, renewal.
Exactly. Holland's adaptive cycle, often drawn as that kind of lazy figure eight, maps out these phases systems tend to go through. It starts with the R phase. Think rapid growth, lots of opportunities, not much connection yet. Like weeds colonizing bare ground, or maybe a tech startup in a new market, loads of potential, very flexible.
Then it matures into the K phase, conservation. Things slow down, get more established, more interconnected.
Right, like a mature forest or a big established company. Efficiency becomes key, structures get built, connections multiply. It looks very stable.
There's the catch.
There's the catch. That very stability, that high level of connectedness, can actually make the system rigid, brittle, less able to cope with unexpected shocks. The report really stresses this point.
Because everything is so tightly linked? Yeah. And that sets the stage for the next phase. A omega, release, collapse. A big disturbance hits a fire, a market crash, a pandemic, and the rigid system can't absorb it. It breaks down, releases stored resources and energy.
Chaos, basically.
Chaos, but also opportunity, which leads to the app alpha phase. Reorganization, renewal. It's messy, but it's where novelty can emerge. New combinations, new species, new ideas can take root in the space created by the collapse, like seeds sprouting after the fire or new businesses emerging after an economic crisis.
That figure eight makes sense, but panarchy is about how these cycles operate at different scales, isn't it? Nestled within each other.
Exactly. That's the core of panarchy. You have fast, small cycles like insect outbreaks happening within slower, larger cycles, like the forest's overall development over centuries. And the report highlights two key ways these scales interact. First is revolt.
Revolt sounds dramatic.
It can be. It's when a disruption at a small, fast scale manages to trigger a crisis that cascades upwards, causing a collapse at a larger, slower scale. Think of maybe a localized pollution event poisoning a whole river system.
Okay. And the second interaction.
Remember, this is the influence flowing the other way. The larger, slower system provides a kind of memory, a template, or resources that shape how the smaller, faster systems reorganize after a collapse.
Like the seed bank in the soil, allowing the forest to regrow after a fire.
Precisely. It's the legacy, the potential stored at the larger scale, influencing the recovery at the smaller scale.
This rigidity trap in the K phase you mentioned, it really resonates with modern society, doesn't it? Our focus on hyper-efficiency, just-in-time everything.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder if we're sometimes optimizing ourselves into fragility, making our systems efficient for current conditions, but potentially very vulnerable to the unexpected.
And revolt isn't always bad, right? The report mentions innovation.
Right. A successful innovation, maybe a new technology or social practice, starting small can revolt upwards and transform the larger system. It's a pathway for change.
But remember can also be a problem if the memory is outdated.
Yeah, if the underlying conditions have fundamentally changed, that remember function can actually hinder adaptation, like trying to rebuild using old blueprints when the climate or the market has totally shifted, can lead to maladaptation.
Fascinating. That tension between stability and adaptability. Okay, let's ground this now. Let's look at a really tangible terrain, the soil, and also the microbiome inside us. The report really brings these hidden worlds to life.
It really does. It talks about soil as this incredibly complex living terrain and our gut microbiome as a kind of parallel internal terrain. And both are facing, well, a crisis of diversity loss. Dr. Diana Wall's work is central here. She's shown just how critical soil biodiversity, all those tiny worms, fungi, bacteria is for basic planetary functions. Nutrient cycling, decomposition, supporting plant growth. It's fundamental.
Stuff we totally take for granted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And she's really championed recognizing these as vital ecosystem services. Her work in places like Antarctica just shows how essential this life is, even in extreme places.
And the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative she's involved in sounds crucial for just mapping this out.
It is. Then you have Dr. David Montgomery looking back through history. His book, Dirt, it's a powerful argument.
Yeah.
He shows how soil erosion, driven by how we use land, has repeatedly undermined civilization.
Seriously, like a direct link.
A direct link. Loss of fertile soil leads to food shortages, instability. It's a pattern. And his point is, we're doing it again now with industrial agriculture, but this time There's nowhere left to just move to. We have to change our practices.
And the report details how modern farming, monocultures, chemicals, tilling hammers soil biodiversity, right? Wiping out the very microbes that maintain fertility.
Exactly. It simplifies the system drastically.
Yeah.
And then it contrasts that with practices like diverse crop rotations, cover cropping, things that actually build soil health and diversity.
And the parallels with our gut microbiome are pretty striking.
Aren't they? Our internal microbial world is also losing diversity due to highly processed diets, urbanization, overuse of antibiotics, maybe even being too clean in some ways.
And this loss is linked to modern diseases, inflammation, allergies.
Yeah, a whole range of non-communicable diseases. The report mentions these pathogens, certain beneficial microbes, called vanished taxa, disappearing in industrialized populations, while others, blossom taxa, sometimes increase, not always in a good way.
It's amazing. These two different systems, soil outside, gut inside, both depending on rich diversity, both being simplified by modern life, and both showing signs of, well, functional decline.
It's a clear parallel. In soil, you lose fertility, water retention, disease suppression. In the gut, you get dysbiosis, inflammation, increased disease risk. They're different environments. Obviously, soil is open, gut is more controlled, but the trajectory is worryingly similar.
The report mentions the Prodigy Project's feedback loop idea.
Right, suggesting that degraded soil feeds into broader environmental problems, which can then impact human health, potentially further impacting the gut microbiome. It's all connected.
And chronic stress affects our gut microbes, too.
Yes, that's another factor altering that delicate internal balance. Interestingly, though, the report mentions studies on composting, showing how microbial communities there can shift towards resembling healthy soil, maybe hints at restoration potential.
It frames the soil microbiome almost like an external immune system for the planet, and our gut microbiome as part of our personal immune system.
That's a great way to put it. And the common thread seems to be this oversimplification driven by modern human practices, impacting both these critical microbial terrains.
And this environmental microbiome hypothesis, the idea that soil could be a source for replenishing our gut microbes.
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea. It suggests that our disconnection from diverse natural environments, from healthy soils, might be directly contributing to our depleted gut diversity. Think about urban green spaces, regenerative farming. Maybe they're not just good for the planet, but essential for our internal health too.
Profound stuff. Okay, so we see the importance of diversity, the dynamics of change, the fragility of these microbial systems. How do we spot trouble coming? Let's talk about critical transitions and those early warning signals.
Right. This brings us squarely into Dr. Martin Scheffer's territory. He's done pioneering work on these critical transitions, or tipping points, where a system can suddenly flip into a totally different state, often one that's much less desirable.
Like it falls off a cliff, almost.
Pretty much. And a key part of his work has been looking for signs that a system might be approaching such a cliff. These early warning signals, or EWS, often linked to this idea of critical slowing down.
Okay, what does that mean, critical slowing down?
It means that as a system gets closer to a tipping point, it recovers more slowly from small disturbances. It loses its resilience, its bounce-back ability. If you nudge it, it takes longer to return to its normal state.
And the report gives examples like coral bleaching. That feels very relevant right now.
Extremely relevant. It explains how rising water temperatures disrupt the symbiosis between corals and the algae living inside them. Past a certain threshold of heat stress measured in things like degree heating weeks, the system flips, the corals expel the algae, bleach, and often die, leading to a shift towards algae-dominated reefs. A massive state change.
And desertification, another big one.
Yes. The example from the Kali Gandaki Valley is mentioned. Losing vegetation cover, maybe from drought, overgrazing leads to soil erosion, less water retention, and the whole system can tip into a dry, unproductive state. The report notes that the speed of the pressure matters too. If things change too fast, the natural stabilizing mechanisms can't keep up.
So what are these specific early warning signals we might look for based on that slowing down idea?
Well, besides the slower recovery itself, which can be hard to measure directly, there are statistical signals you might find in time series data. Things like increased temporal autocorrelation, basically. The state at one point in time becomes more similar to the state just before it.
Like the system getting sluggish.
Exactly. Also, increased variance. The fluctuations around the average state get bigger as the system struggles to return to equilibrium after small shocks.
Okay. Any other signs?
Yeah, the report mentions potential shifts in the types of species present. maybe a decline in sensitive keystone species, those with a really big impact, or you might see an increase in fast-growing, weedy species.
Like the system simplifying.
Potentially, yes. Changes in functional composition. Also, sometimes increased skewness in the data, the fluctuations become asymmetrical,
Hmm.
and maybe flickering, where the system starts jumping back and forth between the old state and the new state just before it tips over for good.
That sounds useful. Can we actually use these signals reliably?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. The report is quite clear about the challenges. These signals aren't always present before tip. They depend on the type of transition. Real-world data is noisy, making signals hard to detect.
And multiple stresses happening at once.
Right. Multiple interacting factors can complicate things. Plus, and this is crucial, if the change is being driven really hard and fast by human activity, the system might tip before these slowing down signals even have a chance to become obvious. The too fast to warn problem.
So, not a magic bullet then?
Definitely not. They're a potentially valuable tool in the toolbox, especially if we combine them with understanding the actual mechanisms causing the stress. But relying solely on statistical EWS, particularly for rapid, human-driven change, is risky. The report suggests things like looking at functional trait changes might be more robust than just species numbers.
Okay, valuable, but with caveats. Got it. We've covered a lot of ground, from microbes to global systems. Now, let's try to really bridge this to our own societies. The report uses some great framing questions here.
It does. The first one is provocative. Could microbial warning signs foreshadow societal collapse?
Wow. Directly.
Well, the report argues probably not directly. It's unlikely, a soil fungus is going to bring down a government.
Okay, good.
But it makes a really strong case that the state of our foundational microbial systems, soil and gut, can be powerful indicators of underlying stresses that are eroding societal resilience.
How so?
Think back to Montgomery and Wall. Degraded soils mean threatened food security. That's fundamental to societal stability. And widespread gut dysbiosis, the rise in chronic diseases linked to lost microbial diversity. That puts huge strains on healthcare, productivity, public health.
So the microbes aren't the cause, but their ill health signals deeper problems in how our society is functioning, how sustainable our practices are.
Precisely. They're like the microbial canaries in the coal mine. If these fundamental terrains are widely degraded, it suggests the larger societal system is under unsustainable pressure.
That's a really interesting lens. What's the second framing question? Something about gut biodiversity mirroring cultural resilience.
Yeah, it asks if our gut microbiome diversity reflects the resilience of our cultures or ecosystems. We know our gut microbes are shaped by diet, lifestyle, environment. Traditional rural populations often have much higher gut diversity linked to better metabolic health. Industrialization, urbanization, they tend to lead to a loss of this ancestral diversity.
A loss that mirrors biodiversity loss outside.
It parallels it, yes. And the report suggests that cultural practices, how we prepare food, hygiene habits, our connection with the natural world, strongly influence our gut microbes. So you could argue that a diverse gut microbiome might indirectly reflect the persistence of traditional ecological knowledge and practices that foster that connection. And losing that gut diversity, losing those vanished taxa, might signal a loss of biocultural heritage, a disconnection from the very ecological context that supported human health for millennia.
Wow, connecting internal ecology with cultural ecology. Okay, and the final question really brings it home. What are the social equivalents of things like keystone species or functional redundancy?
This is where the ecological metaphors become really useful for thinking about society. What's a social keystone? The report suggests things like critical institutions, a functioning, trusted legal system, a free press, education, healthcare systems, maybe key individuals and networks, people who bridge groups, hold vital knowledge, community organizers, even core values like trust, reciprocity, truthfulness. If these fail or are eroded, the impact on society can be disproportionately huge, just like losing an ecological keystone.
Okay, that makes sense. And functional redundancy in society.
Think about diverse skill sets in a community. If one expert leaves, others might have overlapping knowledge. Or multiple social support systems, family, friends, community groups, government aid. If one fails you, others might catch you.
So overlapping safety nets.
Exactly. Or multiple organizations working on the same problem, like food security or disaster relief, from different angles. Economic diversification in a region is another example, not relying on just one industry.
So resilience through variety again.
Right. And the report ties this back to Holling's cycle. Losing these social keystones or eroding social functional redundancy reduces a society's potential, its adaptive capacity, makes it more vulnerable to getting stuck in that rigid K phase or collapsing entirely when shocks hit. You can even see revolt and remember playing out in social change.
It really provides a framework for thinking about societal resilience, or lack thereof, through an ecological lens. Amazing how these principles seem to scale.
They really do seem universal in many ways.
Well, this has been truly a deep dive. If we had to boil it down, the core message seems crystal clear. Biodiversity isn't optional. It's fundamental for resilience everywhere.
Absolutely. From the tiniest microbes to the biggest societies. Pushing past those diversity thresholds makes systems brittle, fragile, and much more likely to undergo sudden, unwanted transformations.
We've seen the patterns, like the adaptive cycle of growth and collapse, and we've touched on those potential early warnings, even with all the caveats about detecting them in the real world.
And the connections just kept emerging, didn't they? Soil and civilizations, gut health and our environment, ecological principles reflecting societal dynamics.
Yeah, it really reinforces those themes we keep coming back to here. Understanding the terrain, seeing the patterns, appreciating interconnection and symbiosis, maybe learning from ecological awareness, and definitely grappling with the impact of modernity.
It all comes together. It's a call, really, to appreciate diversity, nonlinearity, and adaptive capacity much more deeply in how we design and manage, well, everything. Our farms, our cities, our organizations, our economies.
A profound challenge. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to take away from all this. How do these ideas about diversity, tipping points, resilience, challenge how you think about stability and progress in your own world? Your life, your community, your work?
And maybe, just maybe, what's one small thing you could do, one small action, to consciously foster a bit more diversity in whatever form that takes within your own personal or professional terrain? Something to think about.